Hello, everyone. How are you? We're about to start. I was just waiting for everybody else to join. Okay. Hello, sorry about that. I lost connection for a moment. Okay. I was waiting for everybody to join, but we can begin now. Hello, everyone. How are you? We're about to start. I was just waiting for everybody else to join. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the policies for global teacher. Okay. First than anything, let me introduce myself. My name is Fatima Garcia. I'm currently the customer support responsible for Americas. I am from ISEC in Venezuela, and I joined ISEC in November 2016. I remember the exact date because it was the day after my birthday, and I didn't know where I was getting myself into, but I actually liked it a lot. And outside of ISEC, I work as an English teacher. First than anything, let me introduce you to this link. If you haven't seen it, we advise you to put all your questions in there so we can answer them, or I can answer them at the end of the call. You're gonna be able to see this link all throughout the PPT, so don't worry about it. Now, let's get to know the table of contents. We're gonna have some things that are 100% new and some things that are old and they stayed the same, and some that have some very slight changes. First than anything, we're gonna have the introduction. We're gonna have the new product principles and minimums, the general policies for opportunity providers and APs that are the same, the policies before approval, give me just Hello, I apologize about that. I was having some technical issues. Let me introduce myself again because there are new people in the call. My name is Fatima Garcia. I'm the customer support regional responsible for for Americas. I'm from ISEC in Venezuela. I joined ISEC in November 2016, and outside of ISEC, I'm an English teacher. First than anything, whatever questions you may have, please submit them to this link. They can pop up throughout it's gonna be showing in all the slides, so you shouldn't have any issues. Okay, you're gonna see this link throughout the whole PPT, so you should be able to submit your questions through that link. Now, first than anything, let's move on to the table of content. You're gonna have some content that's 100% new, some content that's the same, and some content that has some slight changes. We have the introduction, the product principles and minimums that are completely new, the general policies for opportunity provider and EP, the policies before approval, and the remote feature protocol. The policies before approval are just some slight changes. The remote feature protocol is new. The policies from approval until realization and the policies from realization until completion have some slight changes. And the finished realization earlier, that's also new. The extension protocol, the governance system, that's very new, and the CF flow that has some slight changes. And finally, we're gonna have questions and answers. Let's begin by introducing what's the APIP or the ISEC portfolio. It is defined as a system of programs and services that ISEC will offer to its stakeholder, how they are delivered by ISEC. It includes the guidance on how we engage people, the list of programs with the organization uses to develop the young people, and the explanation and possible relationships that we have with our alumni. We call this the EWA, engagement with ISEC, ELD, the experiential leadership development, and the LLC or lifelong connection. We're going to be talking about GTE, and this is one of the programs that we can find within the ELD. First than anything, let's define some things here. We're going to be talking about the ICB. First than anything, I want to define what's ICB and what's CCB. The ICB or Internal Control Board now changed, and we're going to be called International Control Board. The purpose evolved to support the governance of the ISEC portfolio and ensure customer centricity by guaranteeing operational and ethical compliance in every ISEC activity. ECB and or ICB Control Board purpose evolved to body responsible for the governance and compliance of the ISEC portfolio, internal policies, and the arbitration of cases concerning exchange standards and ER principles for ISEC entities. It is very important that all ISECers must be aware of these policies. The MCs and the ECB have the duty and are responsible to educate their membership about everything. MCs must comply with having an established CCP with at least a chair, an ethics responsible, a harassment prevention committee, and if any violation happens, they are responsible for the sanctions that they will be held responsible and sanctions will be applied to them according to the new compliance matrix. Now let's move on to defining what is ELD. ELD is the phase that includes all the programs the organization has, the impact, the primary impact ISEC offers to develop leadership in young people. Each program we provide to our customers and our partners, and that we use to aim to develop leadership in youth. We do this through offering an inner and outer journey in order to develop one or more of the qualities within our leadership development model. Within this ELD, we can find, of course, global volunteer, global teacher, and global talent. Now we're gonna see them with the product principles for both ICX and OGX, with the product minimums per product only, the criteria to be an EP, the criteria to be an OP. This includes qualifications, roles, and responsibilities, and ISEC general responsibilities. Let's begin with the minimums and the principles. Let's begin with ICX. ISEC cannot be the opportunity provider. The opportunity provider and ISEC must sign a contract before opening the opportunity on EXPA. This should always happen. All contracts should be reviewed by a lawyer. Opportunities must follow the latest guidelines on the APIPs. The organization on EXPA, the dates on EXPA, everything that's written on EXPA should be the same. Opportunity providers must be charged. EPs cannot be charged by ICX. All entities must have a standard trackers. Entities working with global hosts must have a memorandum of understanding, and salary provided must be enough to cover living costs. Finally, they should have a binding contract with the EP and OP. And if by any chance the remote feature is applicable, they must comply with the protocol. And don't worry about the remote feature. I'm going to explain it a little more later. For the principles for OGX, we have the EP and ISEC must sign a contract before officializing the approval on EXPA. All contracts should be reviewed by the lawyer again. All EPs must have an EP manager on EXPA. All costs must be written in the opportunity. Sending entity must add the health insurance on EXPA before EPs are read. And all entities must have a standard trackers, as well as all entities must answer the EPs on EXPA. What are the minimums? The opportunities must be related to a teaching an idiom or a subject of any kind. Opportunities must include the development of skills in foreign environments. The internship should include all elements of the inner and outer journey. EPs must be supervised by the opportunity provider. The minimum time is 9 weeks and the maximum time is 78-week duration for a global teacher. Opportunity providers should always provide salary. And the minimum working hours are going to be 35 hours and the maximum 45 hours. Now, what are the general policies applicable to the EP and applicable to the OP? To the EP, they must comply to the criteria in the section 3.3 of the AEPP, is the criteria to be an EP. To take a proactive step in resolving issues when faced during their experience with ISEC hosting entity or sending entity, and if necessary, actively negotiate with the OP if there is or the issue is related to them. To follow the section 6 of the AEPP document regarding the complaints protocol, and it's basically the case solving flow. For the opportunity provider, again, they must comply to all criteria stated in the section 3.4 of the AEPP. This time is the criteria for the OP. To take active steps to resolve any issue with ISEC hosting entity if any issue occurs, and negotiate with ISEC or with the EP if it's necessary. Again, they also need to follow the section 6 of the AEPP regarding complaints protocol in case of any complaint arises. Okay, now let's continue with the general policies applicable to ISEC. For both entities, they must provide information and assist the EP and OP during complaints or violations identified to ensure the exchange is complying with national law as well as ISEC policies. And in case of natural disorder, crisis, or anything that can affect the state of the AEPs, they must check the status of all stakeholders and maintain a constant communication between sending entity and hosting entity. What policies are applicable to the sending entity only? Is going to be to assign a person responsible for the AEP, that's the AEP manager, and they should be responsible for them during their whole period of the opportunity. That means before, during, and after their ISEC exchange. And to educate the EP on the ISEC exchange processes, including the LDM, the LDA, and our standards before the exchange is marked as realized. The policies that are applicable to ISEC hosting entity, it's to decide the selection process with the opportunity provider, and depending on the agreement, they may execute, monitor, or participate in the selection process. To constantly inform the applicant and the ISEC sending entity about the process of their applications. And again, they also need to educate the OPs and EPs regarding our exchange processes, including the LDM, LDA, ISEC standards, and this all should happen before any EP is realized. Okay. Now let's go with the policies before approval. There are no changes in this part, so I'm not gonna deep too deep into it. What is the main structure of this area is the responsibilities of every applicant aiming to be an exchange participant, responsibilities of every opportunity provider that includes selection, documents and legalities, cancellations, and finally the responsibilities of every ISEC entity. Now let's get to this one. This is the remote protocol. It's very new, but don't worry, it's not that complicated. What we need to know before going to this session is that the remote feature right now is a pilot. Some entities are already working on it. It's gonna get to ISEC, to the whole ISEC soon. It's called a feature because we will not have a fully remote exchange. They need to do a physical portion of the opportunity. And the APs will remain marked as approval until they are finally in the country of the hosting entity. And there will be a button to mark them as remotely read, but we're not there yet. Give me just a moment. And the protocol covers the following topics: definition, requirements to apply the feature, criteria for the EP and OP, policies from approval until remote RE, policies from remote RE until RE, and canceling the remote duration and the extension of the remote duration. Now, let's begin with the definition. The remote feature refers to starting the experience remotely before the AP actually realizes. This can happen in case of a travel restriction or delay with the visa processes. The remote feature can be applied and the AP can start the experience before they actually travel to the ISEC hosting entity. And they are considered remotely realized once they have started working with the company, like the first day of work remotely. The remote feature can only be applied to global talent and global teacher programs. The remote feature can only be done in opportunities with a minimum of 3 months duration. And within these 3 months, there should be both the physical and the work duration. And there's a limit to how much can be done remotely, which is half of the total duration, 50%, basically 50% of the opportunity. And if the opportunity, for example, is 6 months long, the APs can work remotely for a maximum of 3 months. If the same applies, if it's a 1-year opportunity, 6 months is the maximum they can be as remotely while they're finishing their visa and preparing for getting into this new opportunity or the physical part of the opportunity. The working hours for the remote part of the internship should be agreed upon by the EP and the OP prior to the internship starting. This mostly because, remember, they're going to have different time zones most likely. and they need to figure out how their working schedule is gonna be. Once the physical part starts, we go back to the minimum of 35 hours and a maximum of 45 hours, like any other exchange for GT and GTA. And the duration of the remote realization months will be included in the total duration of the global talent or global teacher internships. It will not be considered extra. So they will remain as approval, but the realization date will be considered since the moment they remotely realize until they finish their opportunity. What are the requirements to apply for this feature? All EPs should receive salary for the remote part of the internship, and these methods that are available for payment are based on a time that is 12 weeks. If the opportunity, if the remote feature is going to be less than 12 weeks, the opportunity provider has two choices: to provide salary once the EP has already realized, actually travel to the country, or they can provide online payment to the EP, and this must be agreed between the EP and the OP. And if the opportunity of the remote feature of the opportunity is longer than 12 weeks, then they only have one choice. They have to provide payment to the AP through an online source. The AP should be aware of the solution that the OP has for salary payment, and they should provide a written confirmation of this agreement. And this should proceed before they continue with the approval. The OP is recommended to provide a non-disclosure agreement to ensure that they protect their information, privacy, and all of that for the EP, from the EP once they are about to start their opportunity. All EPs should acknowledge that they are liable for any legal registration or tax responsibilities that would occur due to the remote or physical part of the internship. In case the criteria above is not fulfilled, neither the EP or the OP just not qualify for the approval. Okay. Now, what are the criteria for the EPs? All EPs should fulfill the criteria mentioned in the section 7.4 of the AIPP. Is the same APIP, my bad, oh my God, of the APIPs. And it's the same section as the AEPP is 3.3. The APs who are applying for the opportunity will, with the remote feature, should be willing to demonstrate their professional and teamwork skills, as well as how passionate and how engaged are they with the opportunity they are starting remotely. The criteria for the opportunity provider, they should comply with the clause 7.5 of the APIPs, is the same as the 3.4 in the AEPPs, is simply the criteria to be an OP taker. The opportunity provider should be able to provide an adequate remote and physical working environment to ensure the EPs are not in any risk and will not face any harassment or discrimination of any kind. The opportunity provider should be able to provide clear guidance in the remote working hours, and it's their main responsibility to ensure the EP's engagement with their company. It is recommended for the OP with this remote feature that they already have some experience with remote work. Okay. When does the company doesn't qualify to apply for this remote feature? If it does not agree or cannot meet with the conditions stated in the AEPPs for any reason, if it has been recognized by an authoritative ISEC entity and the ICB for having breached the exchange program policies before, if it does not align with the ISEC Code of Ethics or the Global ER principles, if it does not meet the requirement to enter into legal agreements with ISEC hosting entity, or if it doesn't have a clear legal status that will allow them to provide visa invitation and other conditions required for the EPs to do their physical exchange. Like, for example, to meet the country, territory, and laws regarding migratory labor and the visa permits. Okay, now we're gonna go to the policies from approval until remote re. Okay. The ISEC exchange is considered remote when the EP starts the internship before they go to the country of the ISEC hosting entity. And the ISEC exchange is going to be considered realized when the person starts their first day of work once they are already marked as realized in the platform. What are the policies from approval until remote re? We're going to divide them in ICX and OGX. ICX has two. The first one is to provide a virtual IPS and to provide a written information to the EP about the duration of the remote period and when are they starting their physical period. And for OGX is to work together with ISEC hosting entity and provide a preparation space for the EPs and to set the expectation about everything that involves or will involve working remotely, different tools they're going to use, different time zones, the responsibilities, the work ethics, etc., and many other things that will imply working online. What are the policies from remote re until re? They are the same ones. Let me remind you again, the EPs, when they are in remote feature, they will still be considered as approval. So moving from approval to remote re and until re is going to be the same clauses. Now let's see. The remote features applicable to ISEC regarding the approval until re. For both entities, they must fulfill all the responsibilities that are mentioned in the section 9.5 of the APIP. For ICX, they must host a first day of work, virtual, first day of work. They should have monthly review meetings with the EPs and the OPs to check what's the decided realization date. And these meetings should ensure that the realization date does not violate the section 9.5. OGX is to have bi-weekly meetings with the EP to review how everything's going with their working experience and to ensure that they don't have any issues with your description or any aspect of the remote environment. Applicable to the OP would be to fulfill the responsibilities mentioned in the section 9.5, to provide a safe and welcoming introduction to the EP and introduce them to the company, to the role they're going to take, but this should all happen before they start their internship. To fulfill the job description and working hours that are agreed with the EP before the approval happens. And the ones that are applicable to the EP, again, to fulfill the responsibilities mentioned in this section, to fulfill any legal or tax responsibilities that occur due to the remote part of the internship. And as well, they have to fulfill the job description and working hours that were agreed upon with the opportunity provider before the approval happened. Now we know how this can happen. Let's move on to how to cancel the remote duration. It will be proceeded as an approval break on the platform. Remote duration can be canceled by the ISEC MC of the hosting entity with a confirmation by email from ISEC sending entity to, okay. The reasons to cancel are the same as the XPPs and as a normal exchange. The extension, the remote feature can also be extended. Remember I mentioned earlier that the maximum time they should spend on a remote feature should be 50% of the opportunity. And however, in the section 9.4.1 of the APIPs, we can find that the remote duration cannot exceed the half of the total duration unless exceptions mentioned below apply. These exceptions are going to be that the EP cannot travel from the country of the ISEC sending entity or cannot travel to the country of the ISEC hosting entity due to travel or border restrictions These clauses only applied if the information takes place in an official government channel. The AP cannot receive the visa or work permit on time due to long process time of the visa or unexpected delay in the process or the documents they need to uh, actually get the visa. And in case one of the conditions under the clause 9.4.2 apply, both the EP and LP should provide a written confirmation on their agreement to extend this remote feature, and it can continue until these clauses within the section 9.4.2 do no longer apply. In case the remote duration is extended, both the ISX sending entity and ISX hosting entity should communicate with the EP and the OP to follow up on a possible realization date. These communications should include reviewing the validity of the conditions mentioned under the section 9.4.2. Okay, now let's move on to the policies from approval to RE. What is the structure here? Is the responsibilities for an EP and OP, the responsibilities for sending entity and hosting entity, and the cancellation of approvals. There is one slight change here in the responsibilities of the EPs and OPs. Now they're going to inform the ISX sending entity and hosting entity if the opportunity or EP become unavailable to fulfill their exchange. For global teacher, they have a maximum time of 56 days before the realization date to inform us. In the event of the exchange cancellation happening by the EP or by the OP, if it doesn't happen within this limit, that is 56 days, or it's not considered within the reasons we consider valid for breaking status, both the EP and OP will not receive any compensations and will be held responsible to comply with the compensation policies stated in the APIPs. And the policies from RE to CO, the structure is the same: responsibilities of EPs and OPs, responsibilities of sending entity and hosting entity, and the cancellation of the status, in this case, realization. There are slight changes again here in the sending entity and hosting entity, and it's that they need to constantly communicate with the EP, and this should happen to ensure that what's their location and their safety. This should happen for global teacher in a short-term experience from 9 weeks to 12 weeks at arrival, middle, and final week. If it's a middle length experience, it's from 13 weeks to 26 weeks. It should be at arrivals and afterwards once a month. The same applies for a long experience from 27 to 78 weeks. Now, this is also very new, the finish read earlier. This is very simple. Simply, the exchange is going to be terminated before what was stipulated in the opportunity, but it will not be considered a broken realization, but a finished earlier experience. There is no earlier status. There is no new status. We're going to continue with the same we have right now. The piece will be finished and it will be tagged for internal control as fee earlier. The AP and OP can request the finished realization earlier than stated on the ISEC platform following these conditions, if no violations of the AEPP were identified prior to the requesting of this early finish. If the AP and the OP must provide, the AP and OP must provide a written agreement to the ISEC hosting entity to officialize the request. The total duration of the exchange needs to comply with the minimums per exchange program. In this case, the minimum for GTE is 9 weeks. The AP, the AP can request to finish the realization earlier under the following circumstances: if there's an emergency with their family, if they become ill and it's dangerous for their health. In both cases, they need to provide proof to ISEC hosting entity. And if the EP may be put in danger due to the area where the work being formally declared in emergency due to war, natural disaster, people revolution, terrorism attacks, and others. An OP can request to finish a realization earlier under the following circumstances. The opportunity provider declares bankruptcy or it's sold to a third party that cannot continue with the exchange, where the failure to fulfill its obligation has been caused by circumstances beyond its control. Proof is required for this, and it is also known, and I hope I'm not pronouncing this too wrong, as a force majeure events such as act of nature, conflicts related to the country or territory, and or global political, economic, health, or social crisis, or a declared state of emergency that it directly affects the countries and territories involved in the exchange. This request should be, to request this status, it should be done by the ECB chair to ICB, following the guideline provided by ICB. Now let's go to the extension protocol. There, again, no changes in this part. For the GTE, the OP will need to pay extra fees and will be decided according to the ISEC hosting entity contract with the opportunity provider. And the AP does not need to pay any new fees to the sending entity if the extension happens within the same opportunity that they already applied and are approved for. Basically, the EPs will always pay whatever they pay, and whether if it finishes earlier or later, or if it's extended, they will not be charged a second time if it's for the same opportunity. Okay, there are slight changes in this part. The extension of the global talent and global teacher experiences cannot exceed the 78 weeks. To request an extension, the ECB chair shall submit it to ICB with a formal request following the latest guidelines provided by ICB, and extensions can only be requested if the EP status on EXPA is still realized. Requests where the EP's status are already finished shall be evaluated by the ICB chair and can be denied. We are allowing it, this last part, we're only allowing it until the end of August. Right now, our guideline says that it should be provided at least 2 weeks prior to the finish date. So if you don't have all the information or all the necessary documents to proceed with this change of status, you can actually provide it before it's too late and EXPA changes the status of the EP from realized to fee. Now let's go with something very new, the governance system. Let me introduce you to it. The governance system of the ISEC portfolio internal policies outlines the processes and practices through which different policies and of ISEC will ensure compliance to the policies, as well as the deal with cases that arise. The International Control Board remains as the final body responsible for ensuring the governance system of the ISEC portfolio international policies and ensuring that it is implemented by ISEC entities and bodies. The controlling bodies will be International Control Board and the Entity Control Boards. The compliance system, it's a compliance matrix with all violations and actions that can happen with the APIP and the AEPP. How do we ensure this compliance? The violations can be identified by the following processes: submission of whistleblowing, complaints received, quality cases, local audits performed by the ECBs, national audits performed by ICB, internal surveys, including but not limited to SOGA, GFV, and ICB survey, and the compliance reporting, that's ICB will report on the entity's compliance to the APIPs through ICB quarter reports and the ICB report during international legislation meetings. And ECBs will report on the LC's compliance to the APIPs through ECB quarter reports and the ECB report at national conferences. The compliance matrix, it's an internal control system that contains possible violations of ISEC of IPIPs and its sanctions. In any violation is identified and confirmed, we will proceed with the matrix. The compliance matrix has the following objectives: to ensure that ISEC is a proactive and is proactive and acts in the best intention to protect its customer and its stakeholders, because it is important that we ensure this for our customers, for our stakeholders, not only for ISEC. Ensuring that ISEC entities are fair and aligned with the APIP, reduce the level of risks associated with APIP, and within this matrix, we can find the violations, the risks, and the sanctions that will be applied if they are found. For GTA and GTE, we have the same number. For ICX, it's gonna be 52, and for OGX, it's gonna be 30 violations. Now let me show you real quick. The compliance matrix. Okay. Okay, the compliance matrix is gonna show all the possible violations. Let's move on to the GTE section and GTA section. Okay, so we have the violation, we have how we identify it, and we have the type of risk. We can divide them in continuity, finance, performance, reputational, legal, and the level of severity. So depending on how many X's we see, it will mark the level of severity. It can be 1 for this one, for example, 3 for this one, and whenever they have continuity, it's gonna be severity level 5 automatically. And if we're gonna look for what are the actions, we have the actions taken that can be taken depending on the level of severity, according to which audit detected this issue. If it's in an entity level, they have these actions to be taken. If it's in an international level, it's gonna be with these actions, depending on whatever the violation can be. Okay, and let me go back to the next part, that is complaints. What is the definition of a complaint? Is to raise an issue regarding an ISEC exchange program. Any party must follow the dispute resolution process that is outlined in this session. To dispute resolution process can be requested by any party, exchange participant, opportunity provider, and these claims should be based in the ISEC exchange program policies. For a better understanding, we always define the complaint party, and we define them as complaint party and respondent party, because they can either be the hosting entity or sending entity, but we have one side and the other. The complaint party is the one that raises the issue, and the responding entity is the one that's on the other end. Complaints can be raised within a maximum of 12 months from the original violation date. It is if a complaint is raised after the 12 months, ISEC can deny to proceed with the process. This is new. Now there's a maximum time of 12 months to proceed with raising a complaint against a violation. For the case solving process to be considered valid, the complaint party should always keep record of proof of violation and communication, as well as receipt of all expenses. ISEC is no longer responsible to proceed with reimbursements where the exchange participant or opportunity providers are not able to prove the total amount expended with receipts or something similar that can prove the amount expended. And finally, let's finish the case solving flow. I'm not gonna deep too deep in here. If you have more questions regarding the case solving flow, just ask your ECB team. I'm just gonna state the 3 stages. That the LC to LC, it should last 3 days since the issue is raised by the EP. If nothing is achieved in the LC to LC level, it can move on to ECB level. This is where there's a slight change. It used to be 5 days. Now it's going to be 7 days since the issue is raised by the LC. And for the ICB level, it's going to be 10 days since the issue is raised by the ECB until a resolution is found. Okay, now let's go with questions and answers. Okay, just a moment. Let's see if we have any questions. Yes, we do. Okay, may I have what happens next if physical extension becomes impossible? Okay, let me give me just a second to answer these ones. I'm gonna answer some that were asked yesterday too, that may be some of the doubts that you guys have right now too. Can EPs get approved for a normal project for 3 months and then switch to a remote for a few weeks? No, the remote protocol is whenever they have issues or restriction with their visa process. So it should happen only at the beginning of the opportunity. In EXPA, it will remain at approval despite starting the remote protocol experience. Yes, it's going to continue as approval during the time of the remote protocol. The opportunity does not pay corresponding salary to the EP for 2 consecutive months after the remote phase. If between the remote phase and the physical phase, there is more than 2 months of difference, and the payment part was agreed on the first month of the physical part. Is this a violation? Should they provide a solution to send the money? And this has to do with the duration. If it's less than 12 weeks, they can choose to pay once the AP is realized or provide online payment. If the duration is more than 12 weeks, they must simply provide online payment. Give me just a moment. Okay.
Hi, Fat, do you want me to answer the questions?
Yes, please, regarding this one.
Which one?
What happens next if the physical exchange becomes impossible to the EP because of the visa or travel limitation after the remote work is already finished?
Okay, cool. So hello guys, my name is Karina. In case you don't know me, I am the current ICB chair and Fatima is part of my team right now. Answering this specific question, what we have so far in the definition of the remote feature is that it's not a full physical, like it's not a full remote work. So I would go for your suggestion in the end of the question that should this experience end earlier without offline exchange? I would say yes, because the person cannot travel. So I believe that the end of the experience would be as far as the person can be working in the duration of the remote phase. And by the first part of your question, may I have the presentation document that you're using? Yes, we have is.ec link with all the output of it. I'm gonna type the link on the chat.
Thank you, Ka.
Is there any other question you want me to answer, Pat?
No, that was the one. Okay. For remote feature, it's known that the same online payment methods charge a commission. And that is why we say that the APs should be aware and they are liable for the expenses or taxes that these payments may require. If they're going to be paid online and they're going to receive a certain deduction, it's something that they have to be aware of before they start their um remote exchange. And regarding ISEC will no longer be responsible for reimbursement if the OP or AP can't prove their expenses. The thing is that whenever the EPs were held liable for full compensation, sometimes they were unable to provide some expenses, and it was very hard, but sometimes we had to find a way, and ACBs had to find a way to create a approximate amount to get back to what the EP should or spent during their opportunity. So we can no longer do that unless they provide proof or some sort of receipt, a picture, something that shows this expense being done. We cannot provide a reimbursement. Do you guys have any other doubts? Let me check the chat just in case. Okay, if that's done, have a good day and or night. I don't know. I hope I help you. Okay, and if you have further doubts or anything pops up, just keep typing them, and we'll send you the output once we finish. Bye. Have a good day.